All right, this is section 3 of the Firenock Enthusiast and Dealer class. Let's talk about something that everybody thinks is the most simple and overlooked piece, the fuel points. Anybody know the the ATA, or the AMO standard of the fuel point? What does that mean? That means it's an inside diameter of 5.25 millimeter where you put the fuel point into the inserts, right? Let me ask you one question. How do you know your fuel point is concentric with your insert?
You don't.
So you put a fuel point on, you put some wax, you tighten it, you spin it, it's good. How long does it last? 2 shots? 3 shots? Now you understand why people in the quote-unquote ASAIBO, they say if you go swing points, you're not in the pro class. The pro class, you're not allowed to use screwing points in the hunter class because they consider this is one of the most handicapped portion of your entire system. So imagine you are now in the middle of the shoot and you decide to change your points from 55 to 45 grain points. Just because the bow shoot better because the temperature raised. How confident are you on your fuel points to your shaft that it will shoot the same? But a little bit further. You couldn't. And this is where the magic of what we did. You notice that there's O-rings right here on this model compared to this model, compared to this model. You notice the position of the O-ring? You notice there's 2 O-rings in this. This is actually a patent design. I licensed to 4 different companies on this. But I will not license them to the fuel points. I own the fuel points, I will only sell my fuel points. When you have 2 O-rings on a fuel point, now anybody in the pipe fitter business will tell you, when you put two O-rings and you go between 2 cylinders, the 2 cylinders become absolutely concentric. Think about what that would mean. When the fuel point is concentric with the insert, what does that mean? You no longer need to tune the fuel point insert, as long as your insert is concentric with your shaft. Let me show this a little bit so that you can see. How do you guarantee this piece and this piece is concentric? You couldn't. But when you put a double O-ring on it and you machine the fuel point, you're sitting in this cylinder, you're guaranteeing the fuel point and the insert is concentric. But there's another reason behind it. Why is the O-ring so critical? Not 1 O-ring, but 2. Because every time you shoot it, this entire fuel point will move microly that way. Every time. That's what fuel points do. By doing so, you are tightening the fuel point every time you shoot it. And also concentric it every time you shoot it. That's also with this design of fuel point, I'm able to show and prove to my customer, if you got a perfectly designed broadhead, the moment you shoot it, the morning you shoot go hunting, you can unscrew the fuel point and put a broadhead on it, it will shoot the same. Yeah, which you know you cannot.
We had that with all our S3A kids. They shoot it once, they got to retighten them.
Correct. When you retighten it, how do you guarantee the fuel point is touching the insert perpendicularly and concentrically? You couldn't. Now also a lot of people say, wait, Dosh, your fuel points are ridiculous in price. Like my GL5 titanium fuel points, those are $70 a dozen. But those are 45 grains.
I got some.
But then, how come your stainless steel fuel points are $20 for 6? I say those are 62 HRC, 154 cm hardened stainless. You can shoot them through concrete and they will come out the same. So in other words, you buy it once and they will always maintain true. The only one that will not maintain true is the 45 grain stainless in this class. That's just not enough material. But if you want to push that 45 grain point on a 315,000 arrow, what can I say?
I hit just for these guys, the 45 tungsten, I hit the rebar on a bear went right through the pipe and right into the rebar. It shattered my Aero Concept 22. Hit that point, no, didn't even put a scratch in it. Just screwed it right back into another Aero.
Now you notice that I made 3 classes of field points. The first is called a 9mm. 9mm is a tiny bit larger than the 5/16, okay? That means the 9mm will fit 2 arrows. It will fit the 22 size and the 315 size. Now you notice I also made the 8mm. The 8mm is now being redone in so many ways. That means any arrow size you use an insert is the 8mm. And this year I introduced the first ever Firenock Destroyer series. That's a 6mm right there. Think about it, there's no arrow that's 6mm on OD. This could be interesting, because that's a whole different class of arrow. The reason it's called Destroyer for a reason. Now, you notice that 2 O-ring, that's a change of it. Right here, I will point out right here, this is the Aero Point 1.0 design. You notice the O-ring is right underneath the field point? And then the 2.0 design is 1.25mm lower. You know the reason behind it?
So it's inside of the...
Correct. Because see, we discover when you put it all the way on the very edge, the strength of this part become a little bit questionable, especially even on broadheads. By moving it lower by this much, we actually strengthen the entire system by 200%. Which means that you now really need, for example, you need about 400 pounds to bend it. Now you need 1,200, which is impossible. Now, this one, see, all of them are flat on the bottom. See that everything is flat right here. That means as long as your insert is concentric with the shaft, the moment you put this field point on it, is absolutely perfect center. Every time. Is that something you need to do? Is that, yes, on a super dry day, put a drop of saliva on the O-rings so you don't cut it. A lot of people, they say they just go ahead and push that in and they slide the edge of that O-ring. You just lost the entire design. Now on the 6mm, this is the new fun stuff. It's brand new 2018 design. That's a 45-degree cut underneath every one of the field points. And they're only 6mm. Now you notice no arrow we secretly hunt or shoot or in targets except your X10s and so on are that thin. So what's going on with this stuff? Any question on field points so far? Now you notice the field points are all in different ways. That's the reason, because a lot of times when you shoot target, an extra 10 grain will make all the difference in the world, isn't it? But I give you one step further. I also make the entire thing, which I did not put in the slide, called the copper washers. By using the Aero Concept 2.0, I can let you add 1 grain and 0.1 grain increment with the washers. So you can now shoot 47.3 grains of field points. Exactly. So you can tune your field points in 0.1 grain increment. And still maintain concentric and reliable.
Up to how many grains? Up to how many?
10 grain increment, 4 grain up to 4 grain per piece. Yep. And then you go half grain increment. And then in the case of field points, broadheads, I actually got titanium spacer. I let you tune the field point position in 15-degree increments. That means you put your broadhead on it, it's pointing at 12 o'clock. I can let you point it at 1.5 o'clock if you want to. So I'm giving you that kind of control. So you put a 2-blade broadhead, you sit on your arrow, it's pointing at 11 o'clock, you can bring it back to 12.
Gotcha.
Nobody really think that far, but let me just tell you, you shoot a 2-blade broadhead. The position of your broadhead is critical if you want to do anything over 80 yards. That take-off flight based on arrow spine, I don't care what you do. Until you got it right, it will not fly right. If you can tell me you fly right, only means that you're lucky. And you're just lucky. Okay, now let's go into the inserts. Firenock insert, this is a big year. This is only a small collection of what our insert is. And I will go through that insert to show you what this is about. Right now, all the insert we make is from 204 all the way to or 32 size, which means your basic, your 204 size is your kinetics, your access, your 235 your H class, which is your Excel, your Michael Waddell, and then your 244 size is your Carbon Express, except the SD. Then you move into the 300 size, which is the biggest one. See this slot right here, from this point to this one, the gold one, all the way this long one. Those are the 300 size. Then we go into the 310,000, which is these three, and then finally the 320, which is your Gold Tip 9.3 and also your Eastern Superdrive. Those are 320,000 IP.
The Superdrive 25s.
23.
23s, yeah.
Okay, now let's take a look at the insert. This insert is where all the magic of Firenock component come into it. Let me go to the next slide and I will guide you a little bit what this thing means. All Firenock inserts is based on 6 characters. The first character is always start with an A. That means it's an arrow insert. The second character is telling you whether it's a basic insert or a destroyer insert. The third digit is tell you what technology it has. And the fourth character is tell you the 10,000th ID that you go in. The fifth character you tell you what series of the 10,000 and what class it is. And the final character is the material. Now, how come this insert looks so different from the normal one? And I want to go into it and so you guys see. All the Firenock inserts have 2 major patterns in it. The first pattern is called a reverse taper pattern. And I will go to this slide and show you what that means. See that at the end of the insert, see that's a 45-degree cut right here? That's one of the most important pattern I ever had. Let me ask you one question. When you glue an insert into the shaft, how do you know the insert and the shaft is concentric? So if you got a Carbon Express insert, that's 243. And the ID of the shaft is 244. When you put the insert into the shaft, how do you know that they have no such issue?
Don't know.
Okay, very simple. When you do a gold tip, do a Eastern Access arrow, you know the ID is 204. And the Access HIT insert is 202. You and I both know, you put the glue, you shove the insert in and let it sit.
Hopefully fast enough before it gets
No,
stuck.
it doesn't matter. This is your insert, and this is your shaft.
Yeah.
This is the leftover glue on here. What does that mean? It's guaranteed non-concentric because it cannot be concentric. It can be. It cannot be, no matter what you do. Because if you stand it straight up, the insert will fall out. You put it backwards, the insert will fall away. You cannot possibly do this. So how do you overcome all these problems? Because anytime when you put an insert into the shaft, unless the insert literally touching the shaft, but if the insert is literally touching the shaft, where is the glue? I mean, just like Tim Gillingham and Gold Tip told me, if you want an insert to be good, make it longer and put more glue in it. Great. So how do you overcome this problem?
Taper.
Exactly. Now look at this. If you got a shaft that's, you always square your shaft, right? The shaft square into the, say you've got a square shaft and you've got a clear insert. The insert and shaft touch perfectly, but you can't control the concentric. But if you got your shaft, instead of squaring the shaft, you reverse taper the shaft. Now when you reverse taper a shaft, what does that really mean?
You're still getting your contact point with the shaft, but still giving space for the glue.
Look at this. We now actually offer you a tool made of diamond for under 20 bucks. It is nothing more than a cone with a 100 degree sandpaper for the pro shop and 180 centimeter for the normal guys. You put this on a drill and you push your shaft into it. People say, oh my God, how do you know it's centered? I say, excuse me, you're holding a 32-inch carbon arrow tube and you put it in the drill. How off can you get? No, seriously, Try to make the arrow 1 degree off, you'll be looking like this. Because you got a 30-inch tube in your hand, you cannot be more than a 1/4 degree off. You just cannot. Now, if you make the arrow shaft like this, you can see that 45-degree taper right there on the shaft. And you go back to this. What just happened? 3 things happened. All of a sudden, your insert and your shaft is guaranteed to be concentric. What happens if it's not? You glue it off by 5,000ths. In other words, your insert and shaft is crooked. First of all, it can't cook. If you can, maximum is 2,000ths, the thickness of the plate. But what happens when you shoot it the first time? It's like throwing a ball bearing in the middle of the funnel. Where do you think the ball bearing is going to be? Has to be in the middle. Now, another problem that everybody talk about is a mushrooming of a shaft with the insert with the fuel point, right? We all seen it. You miss the target, the arrow hit the shaft, the entire insert go into the shaft. What actually happened at that moment?
Just recentered itself.
Exactly, for us it is, but for normally, the moment when you have that kind of impact on the shaft itself went through a circular oscillation, like a Chinese finger puzzle. The moment you hit it, there's so much energy, the shaft actually do this. The moment you eat open, that moment the force is entering, the entire thing goes in. Now look at this. The shaft is actually being encapsulated in the corner of that reverse taper. How is the circulation oscillation going to happen? It couldn't. The entire shaft is encapsulated and containing it. Unless the material itself gives, the shaft will always be self-concentric and self-dissipate on energy because everything go forward. The only thing you can do on the extreme cases, you blow out your neck. You cannot have mushroom anymore. Isn't that cool? Now, all of a sudden your insert in the shaft is concentric and your fuel point is concentric to the insert. What part is not concentric in the front?
The point to
The point,
insert.
what did I just say? The arrow point is
Why you got the
concentric.
other 45 degrees.
So all of a sudden, everything is straightforward. A lot of people do not understand when you're in the hunter class, the number 1 enemy of yours is the fuel point not being concentric, the fuel point being loose after the first few shots. And when you retighten it, your fuel point may not be in the center. You are looking from a number 10 ring and the 8. Because it will move like this. Because you're off center now. That's the reason in hunter class, a lot of people actually go so far to put a pipe tape and whatever inside, put extra wax. But that itself do not guarantee you. Actually, this system is so reliable. I got people in the pro class using the fuel point that screw-ins. Because it's that good. And when you bend the point on the disc, you can just screw it off and put a new one on. When you're gluing point and your point bend, what do? Your arrow is done. Now let's go back to the inserts and I will show you something even more interesting. As of this year, all our insert, including Aero Insert 8 technology, that means every single insert here have a 45-degree reverse cut right here underneath it. Every one of them. Every one of them. So that means we're using that technology across the board. Then you notice something very different. This is reason for just on that technology called reverse angle. That's reason the word A, A18, Aero Insert 8. That means it had reverse taper on it. Then the next thing we did is called the Aero, called the D series. We no longer make this anymore. The D means double shoulder. Now this concept was come up to me in 2008 and was patented in 2008 mid-year. What's the reason and concept of the double shoulder? This is where all the excitement of the aero concept come in. So pay a little bit more thinking in this. What is this thing really doing? Why do I need a second shoulder on the shaft?
To support the second sleeve.
Correct. All of a sudden, instead of a single arrow tube on an arrow, you can support multiple. What is the problem if you do not have this and put a carbon tube right behind the insert?
They're not together.
Not just that, you crack right there.
Yep.
Because every time you shoot, because the insert with a secondary carbon tube on it, you crack right between the inserts. But when you put a second shoulder and let the arrow sit behind it, What just happened? You got a full anchor point. That is called a double shoulder, which is also patented by us, called the Aero double shoulder, which stands for the D. Now with this system, it changed a lot. Because see, back in 2008, when Scorpio came out with the Audi T165, shoot 425 feet per second. The highest spine arrow we can find is a Gold-Tip Laser 2, the 300 spine. 300 spine shooting 185 pounds of kinetic energy. It's just a little bit much. So at that moment, I designed using the original Gold-Tip 22 components, and I shoved a different arrow shaft behind it. It changed the arrow into 2 zones, actually 3 zones. The back zone is 300 spine, the front zone is about 120 spine, the mid zone, the transition, it ended up to be around 150 spine. The arrow shoots fantastic, extremely forgiving, because all of a sudden, I have the energy absorption of a 300 spine, but with the strictness and forgiveness of a 120 to 80 spine. So all of a sudden, I'm changing the entire arrow concept from a strict shaft and how the arrow apex. Because now the arrow actually has different zones in it to do what it's supposed to do. But then create a whole bunch of problems. First of all, I got glue separation, which means layer separation. From one glue to the other when I glue the carbon together. And I'm not utilizing the carbon capability. Because the first layer of a carbon, say a normal, say Gold-Tip 22, is a 24 million modules. 24 million module. And then when I stuff say high million module, like a 32 million module secondary carbon in it, by harmonic cancellation oscillatory reduction process, you change your oscillation cycle of a shaft. A normal shaft you could have flexed in the air for 15 to 18 yards. Just by throwing this system on it with the carbon with the right glue, the arrow will stop flexing in 9 feet. You know what that means? That's about 8 to 12% energy gained at 30 yards. That's the reason when I told you using this process, an ASA certified 296 at 30 yards is going to shoot like a 315 to 335. What does that mean to you? Your sight tape, you totally changed, but your forgiveness. If you think, oh, like Danny said, well, this is a 33.5 yard. You can be off by 5, you're still in the 11 ring. That's a pretty damn big deal. Now, the double shoulder have this capability. That's the front end, okay? Now, when I go back to the double shoulder and let me show you what happened. You notice that the first 3 is looked about the same, right? 1, 2, 3, okay? Let me give you a hint what that is. The first one is made of 70-75 aluminum. That's about 21 grains. The one next to it is made of stainless steel. Same identical design, same identical shape. That's 55 grains. Then the next one will be GL5 titanium. That's 30 grains. The difference in weight is your number 1 thing. The second is the difference in durability. The 70-75 aluminum have 1/4 the weight of stainless steel, but only have 82% of strength of stainless. But it's approaching the hardness of stainless steel by 20% less. The moment you go to titanium, the weight itself is half of stainless steel, but the hardness is 2.5 times higher. So your focus mass is less. That means you can now lower your FOC to be close to aluminum to get the arrow flatness, but it will last you forever because you can't possibly burn it, you can't bend it, you can't do anything. You buy a set for life. Now the next 3, you see that? You see the next one is called, you can see a double shoulder right there. You notice the tube is much narrower in the middle? That is for a thicker tube. That means in this 202 class, I give you 2 classes of shaft. You can put an 8.9 grain tubing. Now remember, when you put a 6-inch 8.9 grain tubing, I'm not calling 9. You're adding 54 grain to the front of your arrow without adding any fuel points. But what happened to the FOC? I pull the FOC away from the point and still maintain the front of the arrow being heavy. Now you got a very, very long penetration power stroke. It's like a long power stroke of an engine instead of a short power stroke. But then This is great for Africa games and big games like your bisons, your polar bears, your grizzlies. But for people who want the same concept, the same design, but one will go with the lighter one. You notice that this two part is identical, but this part is not. Now I'm putting a 4.2 grain per inch carbon in it, but it is a 40 million module carbon. Now I really change the harmonics of the arrow and pull the weight slightly backwards. So all of a sudden, your 300 spine arrow is going to shoot more like a 220 spine in the front. But you still maintain the 300 pound power stroke. Or you can all of a sudden, your 70 pounds, 30 inch draw bow, instead of using a 300 spine, you can drop down to a 350 or 400 with 6 inch or 8 inch in the front. See how this whole thing is playing out? Then at the same time, you got 3 material, which is a stainless steel, aluminum, titanium. And the moment I make 204 again, I'm going to do one thing. Now, all Firenock inserts are based on material pricing. That means it doesn't matter what design you have. If it's aluminum, 7075 is $19.95 a dozen. If it is stainless steel, it's $39.95. Titanium is $69.95. This year, just because we're coming out with a whole new economic line, we're going to add 2 more material. So the word A means aluminum 7075, S means stainless 303 or 304, and T means GL5 titanium. We're going to get C. C means 6061 T6 aluminum. The C stands for cheap. It's going to for $14.95. And for the people who want simple and a bit more weight, we're going to add the word B, means brass. That means all of a sudden, instead of paying $20 for aluminum, $7.75, you can pay $14.95 for 6061. So instead of paying $39.95 for stainless steel, I will give you within 5% weight of stainless and go brass for $14.95 a dozen. So now as a dealer, you are not looking at just weight, durability, and aero tuning. Now yes, the moment you start going to aero concept, the carbon tubing internal and the way you know your customer and the shaft become an intimate language set, the language knowledge set that you can only have. Because until you build 10 or 20 sets, you have no idea what this is about. It is so foreign, most people, until you run through this class and get the concept to build, and you start building 10 to 20 sets, you have no idea what to do. Because all of a sudden, the spine means nothing. And the weight means nothing. Because you can play with the weight and spine in points that you never dream of. Because all of a sudden, see, you can now add the 4.2 grain 6 inch on the back and go with a 45 grain point. Your field point is still the same, a 100 in the front, except you pull that thing off by 6 inches. And your arrow shaft, say you said a 29 inch arrow shaft, your arrow shaft bending oscillation cycle had just shifted by 600%. That means in your arrow, instead of flexing in the air for 15 yards, it's flexing for 9 feet. Now when we talk in the Aero Concept 2.0, I will teach you how to make it less flexing, 5 feet, or closer to 3. That means the moment the arrow come out your bow, it's go full gyro. There's no flexing no more. But you still maintain the energy transversion. Now you know why you need to take the class, because if you don't have this knowledge and to build it, you have no clue you can do this. Now,
so the faster you get it into gyro, that's
the more energy you maintain.
The more energy you're retaining.
That means your sight take also getting longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
That means all of a sudden, instead of using a pin is 20 yard, your 20 yard pin just become your 28, 32, 37, all the way to 42 in case of crossbow. It's the same freaking pin. The arrow didn't drop for the first 40 yards, especially the Raven. I mean, just by me changing the string and the vane, the 20 yard pin become 30. The throw thing, I throw Aero Concept 2.0, I add 75 grains to the arrow. The first pin become a 42 yard pin. That changes everything, isn't it?
So speaking of spine, so when you're doing spine, you got a 400 spine arrow for the guy, and you're going, okay, I'm going to add 6 inches of sleeve in here. Now I got on a 30 inch arrow, so now I got a 26 inch arrow.
No, you got 25.
So if I take that, is that what I'm using to look at the spine chart, to drop it down to a 500?
Not just that. When you use Aero Concept 2.0, put 6 inch on the back, plus vane. Your 30-inch arrow just dropped 20 inches. You end up with 12-inch arrow.
Well, that was the rule of thumb I used for the first part.
Correct.
Now that we're putting it in the back, I don't know what to do with that.
Right, but see, remember, no matter what you do, you still have the middle section. That is the reaction of your arrow. You have to a certain amount of spine in order arrow to shoot. Anytime you go under 400, it's dangerous.
So how do we factor that in then?
You don't. You do not go under 400.
So 400 is it? So 400 would work up to 70
90-pound bolt.
So you just stay right at 400.
400 is the
across
lowest,
the board.
unless you do youth. But then when youth, you go into the problem of weight.
Sure.
Because when you add all this stuff, you now the weight chart start going off the chart. Yeah. And not to mention price. They won't be able to afford it. Now you notice that this whole section is about a 202 right here.
So what tells us when we go from a 400 to a 350, for example? Or
That is
300?
where your experience kicked in. Or you call me, I'll give you the basic perimeter.
Yeah.
So I usually tell people, build Aero Concept 1.0 for at least a year.
Yeah.
To get the feel of it. Because it's just like people say, oh, you know, this bow, 70-pound bow, you don't need more than 350 spine. But we know that with something like expedition or like a especially obsession. The draw curve and the cam module is so high, so short. I mean, power is so violent. You need to add at least a 50 spine just to make the bow shoot. I mean, we know that back in the days of the Matthew DXT 70-pound bow, even a 350 spine is too heavy. Maybe 360 is what you need. A 370 would be ideal. But now with the Triax, you know you have to shoot a 300 spine. So in other words, just because the draw weight is not really the factor, it's the cam design.
Right.
Let me just give you some numbers so at least you got an idea. The G-force of a Matthew DXT 70-pound 30-inch draw is about 850 G. Okay? A Japanese longbow shooting 200-grain arrow had 25 G on it. A Genesis would put out 125 G. So in other words, just because how many pounds you pull do not mean anything to how much the arrow is being asserted.
Right, so the harsher the cam, the speedier the cam, we gotta...
You need to, because at that moment, you need to deal with the fact is that the carbon, the layer separation of the carbon, and when that happened, when most of the carbon, when it breaks, it's catastrophic. You have seen picture with the carbon, the entire fiber going to hand like that. That's what happened when you shoot the wrong spine without flexing it first. The fact is that a lot of people will tell you, I shoot the 82nd Airborne 80-pound 82nd Airborne with a 400 spine arrow. The fact is that yes, you can. But you can also play Russian roulette. You may not die. Yes, I understand that. But that would not be me. Or not be my the feature I teach.
Or you just build your arrows. I said, or we just build your arrows.
Now let's look at this. This one is a very interesting piece. If you look at it, this is called the A1A. Arrow insert A, because you can tell you only have one pattern on it. That's the reverse paper. This is called arrow insert D because you have this one and this one. Now, when you look at this piece, this is one of my most more interesting pieces. This is actually the H size, the 235 size. The 235 size is only made by one company at this moment. It's Eastern. It's the H nut. You notice the H nut? I flared this out significantly. You notice that how flared this is? All this. See that? All this? Everything here, the contact surface is exactly at 8 millimeter. That's by design. Having 8 millimeter, that means I only have one field point to worry about. Remember when Eastern come up with the axis arrow, you need to deal with the 5/16, and then a 9/32, and so on? No. So how do you make the broadhead right? It become a nightmare, isn't it? Since I'm designing the inserts, they're all 8 millimeters. So they all fit perfectly. And all the transition is on the shoulder. You can see right here. That's the shoulder right here. See that? Right here. And then of course this is exactly straight. Now, you can see this is actually a 242, 246 piece. I designed this area right here, you said it's 242. This is actually 246 right here, 242 right here. But outside here is exactly 8 millimeter. Now, what's the benefit of doing that? That means this specific insert will fit the Carbon Express, you fit the Gold Tip, you fit the Black Eagle, you also fit the Carbon Impact and Carbon Force, which is the 242 and 243. So now, as a dealer, how many do you need to keep in stock? Based on weight and design? 1. Now, of course, the 246, in my opinion, is not as versatile as a 202 size, which is an exercise. Because that size seems to draw the best balance. So I give this a lot of credit to come up with the exercise. On the 204, because it is such a good size for carbon, it's the one that's the cheapest way to make it. Which is your Element Quest, your Gold Tip Pro Hunter, your Carbon Express. That size, if you want to get somebody started, and the arrow is easiest to build, the easiest to learn this concept. So when you build somebody arrow, the 246 is what I will go for. And you also, with the 246, you will learn the 1,000, 3,000, and 6,000 shafts. The best shaft you can buy is between 3,000 and 6,000. They are the best shaft. They will outshoot the 1,000 every single day, if you know what you're doing. Which a lot of dealers are going to hate me. That's the reason I tell them, take the label off. Because see, as you shoot over 6 months, your 6,000 shaft will outshoot your 1,000 every single time. Because they don't understand what the 6,000 arrow mean. Anything over 6,000, I mean, the proof is that Tim Gillingham in 2012 was given 2 10,000 Strickner's arrow. He shoot it through paper twice and hit the target with range at 100 yards. What did he do? He tuned the arrow to the shot. So in other words, the moment you understand how the arrow behaves and you make 2 arrows behave the same. The whole thing about arrow is that you want every arrow to launch out of your bow the same. That's the reason you tighten tolerance. It is not about one arrow better than the other. It's that all the arrow has to be the same. Because just like bullets, you can have the best gun until all bullets shoot the same, you don't know where it's going to land. Same thing with this whole process. We are tightening all the tolerance. Now, the moment we go into this section, and this is where the interesting section gets. This is where the target and crossbow come into play. This is, of course, you can imagine that's the reverse tapered. That's the brass stainless steel double shoulder. Now this here, the new one. See this thinner wall right here compared with deeper wall? This is where the Gold Tip 22 is going to outshine the Challenger and PS23. Because all of a sudden, I'm giving you a 6 grain per inch inner carbon. If you shoot enough, you notice the Gold Tip 22 will always outlast the PS23 or the Challenger because of wall thickness and the reaction time. The people like the PS23 because of its better reaction time and better spine. But the moment you put a secondary tubing in it, the Gold Tip 22 is going to outshine the PS23. Because the PS23 currently with my system, you can do a 4.2 grain per inch outer wall. Now just like the Canadians who do the indoor 3D, they will tell you, usually when you go there for one shoot, with 12 arrows, you're lucky to come back with 6. What's his name? The guy who win all the championship for the last year and a half, I saw him ATA, he told me, a dozen arrows lasting 3 shots, you don't have 1 Robin Hood. The beauty of the arrow concept or the double shoulder, think through the process with me. When you put a 6-inch carbon in front of your shaft on a long case, when you all want to hit the 11 ring, what are you touching? The first 6 inch of your shaft in the target, am I right? So if I strengthen that, if the outside of the shaft cracked, the inside of the cast supports it. It did not just crack. And not to mention with arrow vein 3, it's going in straight, not at an angle. That means the chance of they touching your shaft significantly lower. All of a sudden your shaft going straighter, more reliable, more consistent. I mean, you have proof yourself in the tournament for the last 3 years. Otherwise, Battle Creek won't spend $3,000 with me every quarter just buying arrow tubes. Because everybody wants it. Because it's just that good. It's that reliable. It changed the entire arrow durability factor. And then, of course, in the case of aluminum, if it broke, well, that's bring nothing because when you burn it, at 700 degrees, it melts already. There's nothing much you can do. But then you're not paying that much. All right, this whole portion is, you can see this is our aero concept. This is the reverse taper. Now this is the fun part. See this piece right here? That's my Aerobolt G inserts. That insert is 100 grain by itself. Using a super thin carbon with an ultra high modular. That actually is the insert that I use for the military. You can put an Aerobolt G system at 620 grain out of a Scorpion Oculus. You can go through a class 3 safety vest at 100 yards. The total loss of energy at 100 yards. That means when you shoot the Oculus at 188 pound kinetic energy, after 100 yards, the arrow still have 185 pound kinetic energy on it. You lose less than 3% energy. Talk about changing the paradigm. And I did the same thing for PSC too. So I actually make that entire set for PSC Tech 15. So at the moment you understand that, the entire cross market is open. So with this system, with the AeroBlink 2 like you just learned, you can actually comfortably shoot 1 inch to 2 inch group at 130 yards at 35 miles per hour crosswind with no deviation, just pull. And it's a guarantee, if not, I'll refund everything. Just like everything I sell. You got 30-day unconditional. It's in writing. Do you know what the word unconditional means? Unconditional. That's a very difficult word. If it's not good for whatever reason, they can and will refund it. So it has to be perfect. So this is where and how I can guarantee them to perform. Because I do it from fundamental design up. Now, this is a very interesting insert. You notice that that is where the 300 stops. This piece right here is where the 300 is. The moment you go on, see these 5 inserts is where the target guy is. The first one is a A1H 315A, a 31A, which means an aero insert with both technology. It's for the 310,000 ID in the aluminum, in the 7000 series. Now that is where you use in the Gothic in the Challenger, CXL, Fat Boy, Element Rock. That's the size you use. Now, this year we added 2 very interesting pieces. And I think you guys some of your customers are going to hate me or love me. These 2 insert have 4 US patents on it. This is called a destroyer. First of all, you got a reverse taper right here. You got a double shoulder right here. How come the front is angled? What's going on here? How come the insert is angled?
For piling in the groups.
To fit the 6mm viewpoint. Now what happened when you use this? Those are 62 HRC stainless steel or GR5 titanium inserts with a 45-degree taper. That means the moment your 100 class arrow going into your target, if there's any arrow in your way, the moment you remotely touch it, you just destroy them. So don't shoot your friends. You won't have friends anymore. But the moment you notice when you go 3D shoots, those 1-2 arrow guys, it's going to be gone like that. So if you're not prepared to shoot any one of arrow be the same, you better don't shoot with guys like this. Some people come with a similar concept, but they didn't execute it right, called Avenger. They did not do the insert right, they did not do the field point right. Because the angle is not right and the angle of relief is not right. Because see, all of a sudden, see that's a 45-degree reverse tapered, will mate with this 45-degree front. All of a sudden, you're talking a pyramid on top of pyramid, circularly. It's a circular cone. How do you bend this? You couldn't. And that field point is made of H2 HRC hardening. It's a vacuum anneal hardening process. So if you buy a set like this, if you break every single arrow, throw them into a fire, burn them all out, you can get every single piece back. So you buy once. But then, if you are good, you won't have too many friends. But as I say, the number one is always lonely. And a lot of us are driving for that. Now, of course, the last 2 pieces. Those are the 32 and the 32A. How come there's 2 sizes? Well, you know, the world we are, unfortunately, is not very common to each other. The gold tip 9.3 is supposed to be like 31,000, right? It's 32.
Go figure.
And then not to mention, the Eastern Super Dry is supposed to be just like the same size as the 2364, which is the maximum size of a FITA. So unfortunately, Gold Tip 9.3 and the Super Drive, they both have the 2364 OD, but the wall thickness is much thinner. So actually inside is 320,000, not 350. While your Challenger PS23, your Rock is 315,000. But now how come I make it instead of 310,000? If you reverse taper, where do you put the glue? You need some space for the glue. That's the reason it's 310,000. Any question on this? Pretty cool stuff, isn't it? Now, with this, all of a sudden you got to play. Remember, you're dealing with an inner carbon tube. Nobody said you had to put 6-inch in it. You can put 5.5. So what are you really doing? What is your customizable weight of your arrow now? Quarter grain increment, isn't it? Now you ask yourself this question. Well, if I put the carbon tube in it, how can I guarantee I have pure surface to surface bonding? It took me a long time to come up with this glue. This glue is at $1,200 a gallon.
Ouch.
But the good thing is that I'm putting together in this format now, so you guys can actually use it. For 20 bucks, you're able to do about 6 dozen arrows. This glue will give you about 2.5 to 3 hours of work time. It takes 36 hours to boil. The beauty of it is that this actually will, if you put 2 pieces of glass, it will go in 3,000ths of each size. So I actually got a video and website to teach you how to put this thing together. So all of a sudden, on the old days, when you have carbon to carbon layers, just like when Boltec was making the limbs, what's the biggest problem with the limbs? Layer separation. The metal is separated with the carbon and then so on. That's the reason metal will never ever work with composites. Not in small form. In bigger surface, you can get away with it. But in tubing, you can't. So how do I make 2 different modular carbon work together? Now think about it, most arrow out there is 24 million and 28 million module carbon. The cheap one fiberglass may be closer to 18 million module. But then I'm giving you 3.5K and 4K carbon. Why do I have to make it that big a difference? When you put 2 different modulation carbon into each other, what is it really doing? It's not in the same phase when it bends, isn't it? The phase are off. So if the phase are off, just like you put a sine wave with a different wavelength on the sine wave, what happened to the sine wave? They cancel each other. That's the reason you're seeing that full harmonic cancellation oxidation reduction process. Even on the lowest form, you will not see an arrow flex anymore at 10 feet. That's a very big deal. Think about it. The arrow is usually flexing for 15 to 18 yards. Now you start flexing in 10 feet. What happened to your arrow energy? It's now stored. What happened to your vane's reaction? That means the vane can do what it's supposed to do a lot earlier. Because as the vane comes out, the vane is still doing this, you notice that. So what is the angle of the vane with the air moving forward? Every single angle except the one. Now it's going into an elliptical spin. Remember we talked about elliptical spin on shaft? Because all the shafts are multi-layer. The reason that people like aluminum shaft because the spine is linear. Which means that when an arrow bends, it bends in the same linear fashion. But the moment you go carbon arrow, because of the multi-layer construction, the angular layer construction, the resulting bend is always helix or compound helix. That means the spine of the shaft is actually like this. And that's the reason a lot of people say, hey Dodge, you know, all the arrow I have naturally will turn left. I say, are you sure? You see, with no vanes, I shoot the arrow in slow motion camera. You can see the entire shaft will turn left. I say, are you sure you're telling me that the shaft is turning left? He said, yes, I can tell the shaft is turning left because I put dots on the shaft, it moved towards left-hand side. I say, no, the shaft did not turn left. What you're visualizing is torsion. And we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail when we go to the next section. Okay, now this is exactly what we're talking about, the naming of the inserts. I hope this now makes more sense. The first character is the aero system compliant, second character is the basic insert. The word D means that it's a destroyer series, that means on 4 of the patterns. The moment, the third is based on what technology? A is arrow angled, D is double shoulder, H is both. And the third, fourth character is 10,000s. That means A1, A30, that means it's 30,000 ID. 24 means 24,000 ID, 20 means 20,000 ID. The fifth character is based on the 100,000s, like 24 means it's 0.240 or better. Or you will see the word L, means that it's a lighter version of that. The S means that it's the standard version of it, and the word G means extreme version. And finally, the last character, A, B, C, S, and T. A means aluminum, 7075. B means brass, C means cheap aluminum, S means standard, T means GL5 titanium. Now, of course, I will give you the breakdown of how the internal look. And then this two is show you how the patterns actually work. See that the H? And finally, this is what the destroyer insert system works for all the 3D guys. The Hunter class is the most shoot class. It's the biggest class of all 3D. Dealers love this. Customers love this when they're good. The rest don't use it, hate it. Because the moment you go in, you destroy everybody. But if you are there to just make friends, don't use this. And of course, this is the piece that chamfer it. Now, we now for the last 4-5 years, the whole archery world seems to be loving the 166 steel. Anyone who want to chime in what's the benefit of the 166? And I'll tell you how many of them fed and what is actual. Why would anybody want the 166 hunting shaft?
Just a small diameter.
What is the benefit of the small diameter?
Better penetration, less drag is what they're going with.
Yes, everybody was saying better penetration, less drag. Answer is none of the above. Penetration has nothing to do with it. Drag has nothing to do with it. It's a 4 cents of higher spine. When you increase the thickness of carbon, you make the arrow feel like it's a higher spine. The oscillation cycle of the shaft is less. The reaction time of the cycle, the fiber is less, which means the arrow flex less, which means when you hit in the target, the backward momentum of the shaft going sideways is less, the more forward it goes. That's the reason people think that is more penetration. It's the energy of the shaft is more focused. But that created a whole new set of problems. Eastern thought they got it resolved by putting the new HIT 440 shaft in it. They told us there is 4 more turns on the insert. Now anybody who know machining, you're telling me a 440 screw is better than an 832 screw, the 632 screw. Come on, let's get real. What is the true strength between a 440 and a 632? There's a 60% difference in strength. And you tell me you got more thread in the 440s. And the next thing, you notice that all the HIT insert have one major problem. What is being exposed first?
Part of the shaft.
The shaft it is. So when you bend the shaft, what is happening? Where is the fulcrum point of the bending? The end of the HIT insert, isn't it? And what's controlling that? Nothing but the shaft itself. And you tell me that's stronger? Now, let's look at, you notice I make all these sizes. Currently we make 14 sizes. Why do we make that many sizes? Because we're dealing with the OD of a shaft. Why outserts? I do not invent this, but I improved on it. It is patented by me now. This is where the excitement comes in. Let's take a look at this inside diagram, and I'll explain to you what's the big deal. See this, the black part right here is the carbon shaft, right? And of course, this is the fill point. And the blue part is the insert. Theoretically, this is the weakest point, am I right? For every single arrow. But in this design, how many things is in this point? The shaft, the insert, and the fill point and the insert. So this, the weakest point in this design is the strongest point. Now we talk about the old days. When you put an outsert, you were old enough to remember Beamans. You have outserts. What's the number one thing you hear about outserts? You cannot remove it off the target. If you shoot an animal, you better put a knife on it before you can put the arrow out. What's going on here? Actually, what you're visualizing is called a wedging effect. When the arrow goes into the meat actually shrinks. The moment you pull it back, the more you pull, the heavier the wedge. Now all of a sudden locked. How do you overcome it? By putting a knife and cut the meat. Now you get it out. Now if you take a closer look at the arrow insert outsert system I developed, you see that's got grooves on it? All the grooves are different width, different depth. This is actually a forging design on a pattern I come up with. Imagine every one of those grooves are different depth with a sharp edge on the edge. So the moment when you reach this point, every one of the grooves behave like a knife. How do you put pressure on a knife point? You couldn't. That's the reason they got blood channels. This whole concept came to me when I was cutting potatoes. When you cut potato, you notice with a normal knife, you cut down the potato stick to the knife, right? What happened when you put good potato knife? You got channels on the back. The moment you cut the potato, the channel let the air in, it fall right off. I said, why can't I do the same thing with inserts? Voila! Arrow outserts.
So on those, are you, to get them concentric, are you doing the same thing? Do you have a 45?
That's the reason I come up with the APS system. Because right now you're using a hydro flow method to concentrate this. Because when you deal with insert of this class, you are now 2,000 to 4,000 smaller than the shaft, which I will show you right here. This is the entire table of every single 166 shaft in the market. There's quite a bit. From the original so-called to all the Eastern Black Eagle, the Elements, and so on. They're all different sizes.
Yeah.
That's the reason I make 14 sizes right now. I got 3 more sizes coming up. They are all plus and minus 5,000s because that's the maximum you can get to play around with. Because anything more than that, the hydro flowing of the glue is not good enough. And a lot of people do not understand how to do insert, and that's where the big deal. When people do outserts, they say they would, first of all, they don't understand what an outsert is, they don't understand concentricity of the shaft. That's the reason that I did a video on YouTube to show you how to put it together. 3 things you must do. First of all, you must rough the shaft. That means put 180-degree sandpaper on the part that you want to rough. So if you are a more anal person like myself, you put a masking tape, 17 millimeter from that. Now you do the roughing of your shaft. Then you hold your outsert. For example, you have 350 outsert, you use a drill bit that at least 2 numbers smaller than it, and you take the drill bit of the drill and you rough the inside. In other words, you score the inside of your outsert. Why do you do that? Why do you want to score the inside of your outsert?
Get the binding of the...
Why do you need binding?
Something to grab.
Right, because the outsert is anodized and sealed aluminum. That means it's got a 0.1 million surface texture. If you don't open up the aluminum, when you shoot down your target, that insert is going to stay there. I don't care what glue you use, it doesn't matter. If you have nothing to grab between the two, it's not going to hold. Now the next thing you do is that just like the video, you hold onto the outsert. You put the glue in, you put the shaft in it, and you hold the outsert without moving it, and you roll the shaft. What are you doing? You're hydro-flowing the glue to concentrate it. The moment you do it 3 or 4 times, you put a spinner, you make sure it's right, and what do you do next? You stand the shaft vertically with the insert up. How many people, oh, it's perfect, and they put the arrow on the table? You just lost your 3,000% concentric. Because also eventually will go in and you'll go in like this.
So why wouldn't you on your outserts, I'm going to give you a free one here, why on your outserts wouldn't you do the same 45 degree?
No, you do not, because when you do a 45, you got pinching the center. It don't work. And not to mention at that moment, you also do not power. You actually cause the shaft to crack in the middle because you start bearing into the viewpoint. You need a perfect flat surface.
Flat surface, yeah.
Okay, now we talk all the basic inserts on the aero front talk about. I want to talk about the back. When I come up with this, everybody thought I'm nuts. Because I'm teaching people how to do a square packing hole. Anybody knows that in the old days, which is about 6 years ago, if you want to shoot a say a fat boy, and you want to shoot a G-knock, how much weight, or S-knock, how much weight are you putting on the back of your arrow? A basic S-knock is 10 to 12 grains, depends who you talk to. You use a shoe insert or whatever insert, you're looking at about 18 to 20 grain for the insert. You want to make a wild guess how heavy is the arrow bushing 2364?
There you go. Go ahead, you guys.
7. That means that with my, you see, I designed it to fit a Firenock A size, which is 204 size. That means if you shoot a 2364, it's automatic concentric at 12 grains. That's knock and bushing combined.
So you don't need the extra material on.
Correct. On the 2764, I'm looking at 17 grains on the back. And by the way, inside this, I will show you this part. This inside have 2 patterns on it. See, there's a reverse taper angle on the back of that insert. It's called the umbrella system. It is not to concentrate the shaft, but to deflate the force. If you look at all my bushings, after 2 or 3 shots, every one of them got white dots on it. They got hit by others. They survived. If you look at them, all the guys who shoot ASA on the pro class, they all use this, especially on the 30X, on the 30X and the X cutters. Those guys, most of the guys use this also will survive 1 year when it doesn't grow.
I've blistered.
It doesn't inserts or survive in a year.
Yes, unless you're Robin Hood.
And it destroyed my point, and it was literally a dot in this bush. And I was like,
Yes, they are 70, 75 aluminum
I go,
with the
kind of-
umbrella system.
I
Hey,
go, what
been
kind of
out there for
bushing?
5 years. Talk to the guy who uses it.
I go, what are you using for? Because I smashed you there. I go, what kind of bush are you using? Oh, he goes, it's arrow. And I'm like,
Because see, what I do is that is the angle. See that angle?
Yeah.
That's a 50-degree angle, not a 45. That's the same as a King Panther in Germany.
Yeah.
Why do you think they put that 50-degree on the King Panther? Because when the bullet hit, tung! So if people do research, why can't I use it? And you know the other 45-degree, when you hit it, because it deflates the force, it will come to the shaft and cause not the shaft to blick, because it covers the shaft. It's called the umbrella system. So there's 2 separate patterns in this. And then I take the hose out from the side. Now, being a square peg in the round hole, what other benefit do I got? You notice every single shaft is made of carbon, right? The carbon is flexible. The moment I make sure is it, the moment I put the insert in it, I guarantee concentricity, isn't it? So how, you know, when you put a Walmart bag, how do you know the left side of the plastic is the same as the right side? So you find your arrow half thousandths off center, which is okay with you, but it's not okay with me. So I designed this. So the moment you go in, you based on the mandrel, which is the idea of the shaft, will concentric and press 1.5 thousand. That's what I got.
so it's not actually a square. It's squared, and then it's got.
No, you got a round edge on it. You can see that this is actually round.
Yeah.
This edge is not flat, it's round. So there's no angle on it. Pretty cool, huh? I'm going to have 9 sizes to fit every single arrow in the market. If you look at the chart right here, this is the chart. Look at that. The 23A is to fit the complex CSL Fat Boy. The 23B is to fit the B Challenger PS23, the Element, the HCA Speed Pro Target. And the 23S is the Gold Tip and the Eastern Super Drive. The 24 is the new Line Jammer and the Gold Tip X Cutter. So you can see all the major ones are here.
So you have all these charts available for us.
It's online. Everything's
all the
online.
Stuff, it's all okay.
How much are these going for a dozen?
$19.95 a dozen. And the best part is that you don't have to use my knife. You can use the.
Right.
I told people, a lot of people are hating it because they say their string maker don't make my A-knock. But since you already learned, you know how good my A-knock is. Now is to make sure your string maker work with it. And if your string maker don't work with it, you can always get the same knot. You can get the F-knock from Bowman, or you can get the Eastern X-Knock. Or the new Carbon Express SD knock. They are all 204. But you won't touch my weight. My A knock is 5 grain, and my G knock is 3.8. And I'm talking my A knock have already proven itself. It goes through quite a few elephants at 120 pound, 90 pound and 110 pound pool. Eastern's G knock will not give you that. Yes, sir. You got a question?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Okay, now we're going to the real fun deal. You learn the inserts, you learn the carbon, and let's talk about aero concepts. The first one on the very top is Aero Concept G. That's the aero that I designed for military use, or for inner city hunts. That's the aero you use a Tomahawk, you shoot an animal, you expect to drop 5 feet. That's the aero you use. But you need at least 130 pound kg, otherwise it doesn't work. The Aero Concept 2.0. This is where the Aero Concept 2.0 comes into play. You can see that you can use different inserts, the front and back. But the glue for front and back is different.
Really?
Yes. For the front, the glue is sitting on the front using the aero insert shoulder. What's holding the tube on the back? The glue itself. So in order for long-term use, I'm going to come up with a new class of glue that, unless you are certified and trained, I won't sell you. The Fox is very high. We're talking 60% Fox, which means like open a can of paint, oil-based paint, and sniff it.
Yeah.
So unless you know what you're doing, you're not getting that. But you have a penetration like you never believe. It is based on marine plywood construction. It will seep into every area. Because think about it. When you put a tubing on the back, the momentum on the tubing is all going forward. What's holding it? Nothing. So the glue is doing 100% of the job. So that is where I would delay Aero Concept 2.0 unless all the guys this year learn Aero Concept 1.0 well. And not to mention, see, because with this glue, without vacuum, you can only flow very comfortably 6 inch. My Dragon Slayer crossbow, at 22 inch long, the first inner tube is 19.5. The second inner tube is 17.5 inch. Now you know why I need a $35,000 vacuum cleaning system, ultrasonic system, plus a $11,000 vacuum system to put the arrow together. Because I'm vacuuming the entire system in to get sure the glue flow perfectly. Otherwise, there's no point building a $50 piece arrow and it won't last. Because building a heavy arrow is simple. Building a heavy arrow shoot consistently with accuracy is no longer simple. But there's only a few guys who do elephant or trophy hippo or go with like I just building half a dozen people who go for Nile crocodile in the 1,200 pound class. Those guys are paying $80, $90 an arrow. But how many arrows you know that will go through a 1,200 pound Nile crocodile? That's a different arrow, isn't it? Now we go to the aero concepts. This is the fun part. This is new for 2008, 17 later. That's the Aero Concept Point 2.0. That means, remember the old days we had the aero insert with the fuel point? Now imagine we take the insert away and put the fuel point only. That means I just saved myself another extra 25 grains. But at the same time, what happens if you want more weight? So I actually designed a weight exchange system inside the fuel point that you can change the weight after you put it together. By taking the arrow bushing with a long tool, you can now change the weight. People say people have done that before. I say, after you shoot 50 shots, my weight will not move. Why? It got my double O-ring design on it. So the moment you put it on, it will stay exactly where it is with no vibration.
So it goes inside.
So this piece actually, the insert, the weight actually goes inside the point.
Inside the point, right.
When you start stacking them, you are stacking your tolerance and stacking vibration. Now you can all of a sudden build an arrow, say you're doing indoor 3D with a fuel point, and you don't see the arrow shooting good. Maybe you need the extra 10 grain, or you put a 30 now, you want to put a 20 in it, and see how it feels. You can do that at will. Pretty cool, huh? That's the Aero Point 2.0. The 2.0 also has reverse taper and double shoulder on it. Now, see, now you always look at the base, now we're looking at the Aero Concept at PS23. You can see there are all the options. You notice the titanium and stainless steel look very differently on the very end? You know why I come with the titanium version? You got to answer the issue. Because when you do a 45 ring and close to 35-degree ballistic angle, compared to full ballistic, the full ballistic will always come out. Because see, when you do a 45 ring and that sharp at an angle, when you touch an arrow in the wrong place, especially the person using an arrow bushing, you are guaranteed the 8, if not out of the 8. But when you do a full ballistic using a GL5 titanium, you're going to slide right in it. But then, of course, if you decide to go with the Destroyer series, you don't care, you destroy everything. Any question on this? This is there the big deal is. All right, then we move to how do we do this? This is what the Aero Concept point is about. You can see how the internal design. The Aero Concept 1.0 point, you see there's nothing in it. We do a screw-shoulder reverse taper. The 2.0, you actually got the weight with that. And then instead of me building you a very expensive tool for 20 bucks, I've given you these 2 pieces. Actually, these 2 are glued together. You can now just go ahead and get yourself a 166 arrow shaft, glue 2 pieces together. You got your tool. Pretty good, huh? You notice there's a tiny O-ring in the front of the tool? So that when you click this all the way to the front, when you unscrew it, you'll stick with the O-ring and pull the whole thing out. Shake it all day long. Now, last part. Why Aero Concept? What's the big deal about Aero Concept? You saw the inner tube. You saw heard about the harmonic cancellation oscillation reduction process. It is all very, very good. What's the downside? Understanding, time, effort. That besides that, you're willing to put the time, understand effort, that is no downside except cost. It's more durable, it's more forgiving. Everything you wanted is there. It's like technology. The moment you understand what you can do, you're willing to put the effort. Just like, what's the benefit between the car and the horse? There's a lot more mechanical work and so on, but you can't get there, not in the time frame. You can't go out and click, click, and then drive. And do all the work. Yes, that is give and take. But in this industry, I don't think there's anything that will come close to this.
I mean, conceptually, it's no different than, like in the firearm world, it's no different than reloading ammo to...
That's exactly what it is. I'm glad you brought it out. If you notice everything I did, it's taking the same approach as Formula One car and firearm reloading. You are reloading your arrow. You're taking, think about it. Look through every single step I just taught you since this morning on knocks. What have I not covered on the shaft? Except the tools and so on, which we will cover. The preparation of the shaft itself and so on. We'll talk about it on the next segment. Now, I did not draw this very good, but I will give you an overall view of what this is about. This is not right, just so you know. But at least I give you a graphic form. This is what an arrow flexes. Of course, you know you're supposed to stick out in both ends, but I don't know how to draw it. I asked my daughter to draw it for me. I just come up with it 2 days ago. So you can see the entire oscillation cycle. The arrow will go through basically 2 apex before it leaves the bow. That is that whole oscillation cycle energy is going through 15 yards in the air. That's a lot of movement. When you have movement, your energy used. The moment you go Aero Concept 1.0, you notice this is fatter on this side and much thinner on that side. By the way, the test, which side is the point of the arrow? Based on this diagram. See whether you can get it. Which is the point of the arrow? The point part, the left or the right on this diagram?
Right, yeah.
Good job. It is indeed the right. I want to see whether you guys pay attention. Because most people, I always point the arrow on this side. That's exactly right. So you got it. Good. Now when you go to Aero Concept 2.0, you notice that it changes a lot. And still maintaining this side is a little bit thicker. I graphically display it. Why is this so important?
Because it's in the center.
Because this is where the shaft integrity is. No matter how much lower you can shoot a shaft in spine, the integrity of the shaft is still the basic of the shaft. So if you shoot a 600 spine and with 40 spine on both ends, you still have to bend the shaft in the midsection on the 400 and the 600. That's the reason I do not recommend anything lower than a 400, unless you shoot 50 pounds or below. But even that is dangerous. But then you got gentlemen that shoot 45-pound bow. Well, that's a different story. Then 450 spine is still acceptable. Then in that cases, you forget about arrow concept and just simply shoot him with the X impact and so on. Because any arrow that thin, the chance of hurt is too high. All right, that will be the end of this section.